Good afternoon. The committee of the whole is called. Thank you. We're back from recess. Unfortunately, we don't have a quorum yet, so we will stay on recess until we get a quorum. There's only 6 of us. I'd like to thank my colleagues that have joined us this afternoon: Senator Guåhan, Senator Taitigui, Senator Duenas, Senator Fisher, Senator Kanata. Thank you. We're back at recess. The committee of the whole is called back to order from recess. We are now going to move along with the next amendment proffered by Speaker Therese Terlai. Amend the Restoration and Chamorro Trust funds. That's what the topic is about. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is these two amounts, 320,000 and 321,000. Some are these are taken from an audit, and so it's to restore these amounts to this Chamorro Loan Guarantee Fund, and because these were amounts that were taken in prior fiscal years but not able to be replenished for some reason. They were taken by a governor, so I'm trying to replenish them now to add on to the fund that they can use to guarantee loans. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so there's several versions, sorry, to get rid of all the, the version that was originally submitted was to take it from rainy day funds. So I don't want to do that anymore, and I had submitted an amendment to that. You could treat it as a clean one if you want, and that is to take it from audited excess general fund revenues for fiscal year 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I was going to make that statement because what you read was the clean one. Are there anyone like to discuss it? If not, are there any objection to that amendment? I don't see room for discussion. Okay, no objection. Amendment passes, ma'am. Now, we have the other amendment now is from Senator Snickers. I think Senator Canata, you're going to read it out? That's the one, the appropriation for the Sanctuary Incorporated of Guam. Senator Canata, you ready?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to add a new section to Chapter 11 of the bill to read Section Allocation of the Guam Crime Stoppers for fiscal year 2024. The sum of $100,000 shall be allocated to Department of Administration from the General Fund Appropriation subsection M1 of Chapter V of this Act for the Guam Crime Stoppers.
No, that's done. We're talking about the one with Sanctuary? Appropriation for Sanctuary Incorporated? Let's take a quick recess while you get it. Thank you. The committee of the whole is called back to order. We're going to go ahead and suspend on the amendment of Senator Snickers, and we're going to go to the amendment of Senator Barnett.
Thank you,
Senator
Mr.
Barnett,
Chair.
you have additional student enrollment in Guam charter schools. Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. The amendment reads, that's on page 114, to add a new section to Chapter 11 of the bill to read. Additional student enrollment in Guam charter schools. The sum of up to $4,875,000 is appropriated to the Guam Charter School Council from excess general fund revenues of FY23 for the purpose of funding additional unanticipated student enrollment in the existing Guam charter schools and also a new Guam charter school for the school year 2023-2024. And that's, oh, this is the wrong one. Sir, can I get a moment's recess?
Yes, I was
Thank
hoping
you.
you were going to call that. Thank you. Recess. Committee of the whole is called back to order. Senator Barnett, I know that you have an amendment.
I sure
that
do,
you can
Mr. Chair.
strike, and then we can just write it in.
Yeah,
and-
let me just read it out, and then I'll just go ahead and do a strike through on my own. The amendment amends page 114 of the bill to read additional student enrollment in Guam charter schools. The sum of $4,410,000 is appropriated to the Guam Charter School Council from excess general fund revenues of fiscal year 23. But I want to strike that through, sir, and I want it to be audited excess revenues from fiscal year 2022.
Point of inquiry. Point of inquiry,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you, Senator
Thank you.
Barnett.
For the purpose of funding additional unanticipated student enrollment in the existing Guam charter schools and a new Guam charter school for the school year 2023 to 2024. And the simple math on this, sir, which I'll go into further, it's 188 additional enrollees for existing charter schools and 400 enrollees for a new charter school at $7,500 per enrollee, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Barnett. Anyone like to speak? I see Senator
Just-
Fisher's
can I
hand
speak
up.
further, sir?
Just a point of
Sir.
inquiry. It's just a point of inquiry.
Okay. Stand by.
That's the wrong one.
Senator Barnett, are we good? Yeah, you still want to speak? Hold on, Senator Fisher. Let them finish. He's opening.
Let him finish.
Thank you. Sir, so
It's a point of inquiry. I can bring it up anytime.
we all are familiar with the current circumstances of the Guam Department of Education, sir, and unfortunately, I know in the budget hearing, the Charter Council had testified that they were looking at and had already been experiencing increased enrollment, and we can argue back and forth about whether or not that had anything to do with GDOE's current circumstances. I think it did. However, the budget bill did not reflect these anticipated, well, then they were anticipated increases, but I've since met with the charters, and I do have some numbers here, sir, that I would like to read out. So for the CIFA charter school, which started classes on August 4th, their cap was 350, and they have enrolled 422 students. Career Tech, which started classes on August 9th, their cap was 70 students. They have enrolled 137 students. iLearn Academy started classes on August 9th. Their cap was 740. They have exceeded that by enrolling 778 students. Sir, and then the new charter, which according to Ms. Vanji, who heads the Charter Council, is slated for a public hearing next week, and they're anticipating a subsequent approval and granting of that new charter, sir. So it is what it is. What we had here was a situation where the Guam Department of Education announced that they weren't going to be able to open schools until August 23rd. And at the time that the charters were starting their school year, it was much earlier, and this news had come out. And so, in talking with the charters and being a parent of a public school student myself, I know that there was anxiety and uncertainty around whether or not GDOE public schools would open on time, B, what condition those schools would be in when they did open, and see how many of those facilities would be open and available for GDOE's plans about double sessioning and all that. And so I think that this was a natural thing, sir, as we saw more GDOE headlines and uncertainty. I think people migrated over to the charter system, and they ended up exceeding their enrollment. Sir. So I know we can argue that these are legal caps that were set, but I think they did make their need known in the budget hearing, and they've again communicated that need to me. And I think the danger of not approving this funding, sir, is that we have students who have already enrolled with these charters, sir, and we would create a situation where either the charters would absorb this with their existing budget, which I don't think is very feasible for a lot of them, or these students would have to be cut loose, sir. So I think that this is something that we need to take care of. And I have, in meeting with the charters, shaved down these numbers and advised them to quit enrolling students. As we sat down just a few days ago, and that was the first thing I said when I sat down was I don't want any more students enrolled. And, you know, I'll take this to the body and put it before them, and we'll discuss the numbers, and, you know, hopefully I could get the support of my colleagues on this, sir. I haven't always been a supporter of the charter schools, Mr. Chair, but I think that we have a good assemblage of charter schools that really offer something different from the Guam Department of Education in terms of their curriculum and content. And I'm a public school product, sir, so I don't want to get into beating up on our public school system. But again, it is what it is. You know, right now there's a lot of uncertainty, and I have plans to support the Guam Department of Education in upcoming amendments. But at first, I feel like we need to address this issue where the conditions of the schools and I mean, you know, let's be honest, some of the actions of some of our elected leaders that led to students returning to these schools that a lot of people agree are not safe or ready. And I think that that's the increased enrollment with the charters has been a byproduct of that, and a byproduct that I believe this body would be well inclined to support, Mr. Chair. So again, I humbly ask for the support of my colleagues, and thank you.
All right, Senator Barnett, the only thing I have a question with is that, and I believe my colleagues will ask this, 188, can you identify each charter school? And the reason for that is because we don't want one charter school that says, no, I want all 188. We want to make sure it's broken down so we know which charter school is going to get what.
Okay, sir, so for CIFA, their cap was 350, and they have asked to increase it to 430. And they have currently enrolled 422 students, Mr. Chair, and although I did say don't enroll anyone else, there's a little bit of a breather there for them to accommodate for any enrollments that were already in progress. Yes, Career Tech from 70, they've doubled their enrollment, sir, and I think a big part of that is that they are offering a deaf academy at the school, as well as they're the only charter that really offers trades curriculum, sir. So they have asked that their cap be increased to 140. They currently have enrolled 137. I Learn Academy has asked that their cap be increased from 740 to 780. They have currently enrolled 778 students, Mr. Chair. And then for the new charter that we created via public law, that charter is slated for a public hearing on September 7th, and according to Ms. Vanjie, everything looks smooth, and they are anticipating a meeting in the days after the public hearing to and I'll say hopefully approve the new charter, sir. So given those circumstances, sir, I'd like to have that funding available so they could just hit the ground running.
All right,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm just looking at your numbers. I learned 40 plus, right? CFA 80 plus, correct?
Or just 80?
80, no, 80 plus from what they have is what I'm going after.
Yes, so I Learn is going from 740 to 780, so that's an
That's
increase
correct.
of 40.
That's 40.
Career Tech 70 is the increase from 70 to 140.
Correct?
And then CFA from 350 to 430.
And the only reason why that numbers exceeds the 188, and I just want to make sure we got the numbers right. It's right now it's 190 because you didn't identify Guåhan Academy.
Guåhan Academy is, okay, so this is Guåhan Academy. Their cap is 765, and they have only enrolled 751, and they're not going to, as my understanding, they won't enroll anymore.
Okay, the only reason why, because your 188 became, it's actually 190 what you identified.
Okay.
So you might want to maybe make that known that you're looking at 190 instead of 188 enrollees. Just so we can adjust the numbers that we need to adjust.
Okay. Sir, again, for the Guåhan Academy Charter School, their cap is 765. But they have only enrolled 751 for school year 23-24, so there will be no increase there. There's no increase requested from GACs, sir.
Okay, and with that, based on your numbers, we're going to do the math so we make your numbers adjust from 4,410,000. It'll have to move up again because of the additional two, which is 15,000. It's not really a whole lot.
It is, sir. I'm fine with the language as it is. I do appreciate the effort on your part and OFB's, but I think we would be good.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Senator Fisher speak.
No,
I think you had a.
Again, I just have a point of inquiry.
Okay, go for it.
If I may ask the gentleman, when he read this section, he read on the second line, the sum of 4 million, etc. Does he mean the sum of or the sum up to? That's my question, sir.
Oh, the verb is of the sum of up to. So
Sir, we can go ahead and strike that up to.
No, it has to be the sum of 4 million.
Yes, so we could strike up
because if you
to.
do the sum up to, you can't exceed the 4 million.
Great.
But
So
at the same token, your numbers need to change to 4,425,000 now.
and that's adding an
think-
additional 15,000 for the
That's
two
correct.
enrollees. Thank you,
Right.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, so it's to strike the sum of up, no, to the sum of,
Well,
not the up to.
That's quite different.
Yes,
Very different. Okay, thank you.
okay. Oh, that's just a point of inquiry. Senator Barnett will do the change, okay? Okay, because a point of inquiry is not an amendment, all right?
Okay,
Mr. Chair, can
but
I just get a short recess?
Okay, we'll do a short recess to change it. Thank you. Committee of the Whole is called back to order from recess. Senator Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to amend my amendment that I was proffering, and the amendment to the amendment reads, additional student enrollment in Guam Charter Schools, the sum of $4,425,000 is appropriated to the Guam Charter School Council from excess audited general fund revenues of fiscal year 2022 for the purpose of funding additional unanticipated student enrollment in the existing Guam Charter Schools as follows: 40 students for I Learn Academy Charter School, 70 students for Career Tech High Academy Charter School, 80 students for Sciences Fun and Awesome Academy Charter School, and 400 students for a new Guam Charter School for the school year 2023-2024. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. No, he just replaced. See, remember earlier, colleagues, I asked him to break it down because based on the budget, we have to identify per school, and that's what he did was he just identified per school to match the 188, which is really 190 to count, and it just took care of that. Unless you have an objection to it, otherwise I have no problem with it, and we're just going to move along with this. Senator Tello?
Mr. Chair, I think it'd be a lot cleaner if we just replace this one, withdraw this amendment and put this one in front, because this has a lot of changes. Not only is it adding the revenue stream where it's coming from, but it also changes the number. It was at 4,875,000, now it's at 4,425,000. There are a lot of changes into this.
I'm
so
sorry.
Can we just
I'm sorry,
withdraw?
Senator.
Yeah.
I think Senator Tello has the wrong copy, because the amount should read $4,425,000, Mr. Chair.
4,425,000, right?
Correct.
Yeah, but the first amendment that came out, yeah,
4,410,000 was the first amendment.
Okay, yeah, I'm
It
looking,
only added
yeah,
the
the first
15,000
amendment,
because of the
right?
two.
Okay, yeah,
Mr. Chair, if I could just explain the 188 number that was in the amendment as originally proffered was real enrollment, but these charters have asked to increase their cap, and so the 190 total is reflective of the cap increases for I Learn, Career Tech, and CFA. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Senator Tello, are you good with this?
Well, Mr. Chair, it's just a lot cleaner just to withdraw his first amendment and then put this one, substitute it for this new one. It's a lot cleaner that way.
Is that your proposal? So
That's
that
my proposal, yes.
okay, if no one has any objection to it, I mean, Senator Burnett, no, he's good with the way it is, so it just moves on. Senator Tello, what's going to happen is that if you with what he amended, if we withdraw it, the one you got that's got the strike has to be cleaned up also. So by just leaving it alone, we just move along. Okay, we'll just proceed with it. A 1-minute recess. Committee hall is called back to order. Senator Burnett.
Mr. Chair, may I make a motion to withdraw my amendment to the amendment?
Yes. Are there any objection to withdraw the amendment? There being none.
May I also make a motion now to withdraw my amendment and proffer a new amendment in its place?
Are there any objection to that withdrawal? There being none. So, Senator Burnett, you have a clean version now of
Thank
your
you.
amendment. Thank you.
Again, it's amending page 114, and it reads to add a new section to Chapter 11 of the bill to read additional student enrollment in Guam charter schools. The sum of $4,425,000 is appropriated to the Guam Charter School Council from excess audited general fund revenues of fiscal year 2022 for the purpose of funding additional unanticipated student enrollment in the existing Guam charter schools as follows. 40 students for iLearn Academy Charter School, 70 students for Career Tech High Academy Charter School, 80 students for Sciences Fun and Awesome Academy Charter School, and 400 students for a new Guam charter school for the school year 2023-24. That's the amendment. Again, sir, the Charter Council in their budget hearing had said that they were tracking additional enrollment, and I think it's safe to assume that was because of everything going on with the Guam Department of Education, but we have a more accurate read on that enrollment now that I've been able to meet with them closer to this budget session again. So I ask for the support of my colleagues to help move this amendment and hopefully get it passed, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope we had sufficient communication about this. Are there any objection there or room for discussion? If not, we'll go ahead and No, they're good. Everybody's good with this. Senator, Madam Speaker, you wanted to speak on the amendment? Yes, on the current amendment. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this, there's no other amendment to the amendment? Okay, all right. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to ask the author if he would yield a couple questions. One is, did I hear correctly that the schools had over-enrolled based on what they are legally allowed to do by law?
Senator Burnett, do you yield to that question?
Yes, sir, I do. Can I hear the question again, please?
Yes. Did the schools over-enroll based on what they're allowed to do by law? In other words, is that legal? Are there any penalties for violating the enrollment caps? Because the school years have already begun for most of these schools.
Speaker, Senator Barnett, there's no penalty, but the charter school would have to absorb that cost because there is a cap.
In the event we don't pass the amendment, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, so to yield to I do yield to the question, and the answer is yes, the charter schools did enroll above and beyond their caps that were set in the last budget, sir.
Thank you. So that means that they were already okay with absorbing these additional costs, right? And that's how it looks to me. They willingly exceeded the caps. And can I just ask, it's just a special year to be doing this because this is the year when we're trying to make sure that the GDOE gets every resource that it can possibly. I'm not asking a question. That GDOE can get its resources, and this is the year that we're trying to mandate that GDOE comply with every requirement that's out there for them, particularly sanitary permits, sanitary rules and regulations. And last time I checked, none of these charter schools is mandated today to comply with the sanitary rules and regs or to even get sanitary permits, unless it's the AG's interpretation that they are. But the law seemed to exempt them. And so I'm just concerned about that, like the message that we send that we want to come down really hard on GDOE. We want them to comply with the sanitary permits, the rules, and now we want to make a big exception for, well, not a big exception, but just to to give a lot more money to those who are not complying with laws, caps, or sanitary rules and regulations. I don't think these schools even comply with the mandates that we put on our public schools in the curriculum, for example, to teach Chamorro. I don't think they comply. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure we're going to see soon whether they're mandated to comply with ADA and all of the special education requirements that our public schools are mandated to do, now that they should be treated like public schools, public entities, and I don't know if that's all been really fleshed out to date. GDOE told us in the budget hearing, in our budget session when they were here, that they are $30 million short for operating expenses for this fiscal year, and that their $20 million for capital improvement projects had been taken from the administration, and that they wanted it back. And then they came back and said they don't need it back anymore. And now we're giving money over to, I don't know. It's very confusing to me what kind of message we're trying to give to GDOE. And I wanted to ask OFB, Mr. Chair, you. So last year, the amount that we paid for each charter school student was $7,000. But in FY24, now it's $7,500 per student. Can I ask how that changed? Or I don't remember a public hearing on that.
Senator, to my recollection, you're correct. The cost per student for the charter school that was approved in the FY23 budget was $7,000 per student. However, also in the FY23, there was a provision that read that based on the federal income tax, Section 30 funds, that whatever the excess would be, we would allow up to $500 per student per charter school, and that came up to about $962,500. So I believe it was the understanding, I believe, of the charter school now that because we passed that law, that provision in the Budget Act, that made it up to $7,500 per student, that was a thought in theory now that that's the cost per student for FY23 going into FY24. We used the $7,500 amount, cost per student, when we budgeted the FY24 appropriation for the charter school.
Can you just clarify? So you mean that somewhere in FY23, the amount that we were giving them changed from $7,000 to $7,500 because of Section 30 reconciliation?
If you look at Section 6 of the Budget Act,
The FY23?
the FY23, and I'll just read it so people would understand. It says, notwithstanding other provision of law, funds in excess of adopted revenue levels enumerated in Section 2IB of this chapter in the amount of $962,500 would be appropriated to the Guam Charter School Council Fund for the purpose of increasing the per pupil cost by $500 per pupil.
All right, thank you. So they did do that, you're saying?
It's in the Budget Act, yes.
No, but did they do it?
I believe so because I believe the money was already transferred to them, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess that's all I have to say on this. It's just very concerning to me that we're, after the fact, going in and condoning something or paying for something that they had already stated they're willing to pay for. Wow, we've got GDOE $30 million short, 20 million CIP project out the door. That's a total of 50 million. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Vice Speaker, you had your hand up. You wanted to speak, and you'll be followed by Senator Duenas. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. And not that I have a problem with this amendment, because I support the student enrollment for Guam charter schools, and I know that the Charter Council exists, and that when we look at the numbers, I know there's a ceiling. And I know that with the 400 students for the new Guam Charter School, that was accepted by the council. And maybe I just need a reiteration. Is that correct? Approved by the Charter Council?
Not yet. They got a meeting coming up, I think in another week. Then they're going to finalize it. But generally speaking, it's been accepted. It's just they have to have a formal meeting to make it official.
So, I guess specifically for this amendment in particular, because I'm looking at the numbers, and if the students are increasing in the charter schools, are those students coming from the public schools? Maybe ask OFB, or if I don't know if anybody can answer.
No, as a
I
matter
don't
of
think
fact,
anybody knows that, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, there's nobody really knows because there's kids coming from off island, and some of them are from private schools. So it's not necessarily all DOE. Okay?
Okay. So maybe my next question to ask is, will this August body find the head count for the students that are coming in and out and enrolling from one school to another? Because if we're seeing the increase, charter schools average at 75 per student compared to the DOE students at what amount per student? Steve? Is it at 10,000 now?
Senator, I believe the cost per public student in the public school is roughly about 11,000 per student.
Right, and I'm just wanting to make sure that if we are providing for the additional numbers and we're looking at cost and seeing what the charter schools can provide, knowing that it's coming from the same government, if we had to take from DOE to give to charter school, then I don't have a problem. You know, you're looking at an 11,000 per pupil to 7,500 per pupil that work the same mandate, but the thing is that the charter school has a specific mission or criteria that they work through, whatever the charter is envisioned for. So my take is I want, and I will support this amendment, and I just think that maybe for future reference, that if there is a cross and a number that we can get per student that's coming out of the public school going into the charter school, then maybe we can work the numbers from there. Because it is that important. When you look at a $3,000 or almost $3,000 difference, and I don't know if OFB would like to comment on that based on the amounts that are charged between charter and the public school system.
No, I think we need to be very careful how you want to compare. And the reason why I say this, DOE has an organization. They're not one school. They're multiple of 41 schools. They have a central office and everything. And I know you understand that, Vice Speaker. and when we're dealing with the charter school, they're individual schools, and there's certain allowance that was passed by law. If we change the law, then it will change the school.
And Mr. Chair, based on experience and years within the government for both you and I, you know that we've been down this road before.
Yes.
So I'm just saying that in the efforts of promoting or advocating for this amendment, I think I do support it, and I'm just hoping that in the future that we get those kind of numbers so that we can account for accordingly. But I do want to say for the record and to my colleagues that I support this amendment, and I ask that my colleagues at least consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Dueñas, I know you had your hand up. Sir.
Mr. Chairman. Salapi para estudiantes. Let's support it. You know, Mr. Chairman, I think it's just important to have some perspective here. And I've been listening to the conversation, and it's been very educational. And first of all, I think it's important to note that these schools are not asking for anything above what their noted caps. were set at. Albeit that when the budget came out, that was less than what their current enrollment was. And so I think that's important. We also have, Mr. Chairman, passed in law, the ability to add charter schools. I think it's important for us to live up to that commitment and make sure that we fund, an impending charter school that we believe, if all the ducks are in a row, will come online. I also think, Mr. Chairman, it's very appropriate that we identify this funding source. I know that this has become a funding source of choice, and to me, the reason why I have a certain comfort level is I know that as we had already in the prior fiscal year in 2022 identified a number of different projects for excess revenue, I could tell you at least of 2 to 3 major projects that I would be looking out for and have not seen any procurement proposals for. And we are now, of course, only probably weeks away from the audited financials on that funding. I think it's important, Mr. Chairman, at least I've taken the opportunity to look at those areas where our true commitment ought to be. Certainly in this area of education, I think there's no question. I think, Mr. Chairman, and even the superintendent has given a nod to understanding this process going forward. First of all, in his full support of the newest application of a charter school, I think there's a realization that, as the retiring speaker had discussed, there's going to be some levelizing at some point in terms of the Department of Education. And I support, maybe our education chair could pen a letter to the schools to maybe start keeping track of the data of those children who are coming into the charter schools. What is the source? That's going to be good information for us going forward. I just think that in closing, the charter schools have demonstrated, I believe, and particularly with the number one judge of whether the charter schools are doing well or not is the parents, that they've been successful at not only meeting but exceeding the needs in the requirements, even though and albeit a different structure of the schools, to meet the educational needs of those children, for them to thrive and them to find their pathway to a better future. I wanted to end with the fact that one of my colleagues I know had spent some time earlier, I think today, at iLearn, and that school in particular, because it's a STEM school, and we've talked about the university earlier, and we've set the parameters for science and engineering and that capability to thrive and grow. The student population there and the expansion and the success of that school alone, I think, is really noteworthy in discussing education on Guam. So I do understand the concerns, but I think that this funding source is, I mentioned to another colleague earlier, we have a Santa Claus in this house, which is a good friend of mine. I enjoy his presence, but we're going to have a secret Santa now down at Adelup that will see who's naughty and who's nice when it comes to seeing what priorities will be funded. But I believe that this priority, as Steve has laid before us, that when these appropriations pass, they are a duly adopted appropriation and will be considered under what are the priorities of the funding source capability. So, maybe many of us will send a candy cane down to the front office and see if we can put it in the stocking and get some consideration. But I think that all in all, this is the right thing to do. And once again, in closing, anticipating the new school, as well as those schools who are enrolling above their caps with the faith and hope that they'll be able to receive that. But I just think overall it's a great sign for us to see those schools grow and thrive. So just Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Senator Tello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If there's one successful story that we can talk about when it comes to education on Guam, is charter schools. We've seen them test, these students come out testing higher, and that's why we're seeing more parents now gravitating toward charter schools. You know, it was mentioned earlier about what they're, well, it was talked about on the permits, their sanitary permit. According to the public hearing we had, when we had a budget hearing, Vanjie assured us that they all have their permits. So it's not like they didn't have it. You know, Mr. Chair, I'm one of the biggest advocates for charter schools. Times have changed. We're starting to see new innovative ways of schools and teaching our students, teaching them a career, going directly to something that would interest them, like science, technology. It's giving them a head start before they start a higher educated field. So, and you know, one size does not fit all, my colleagues, especially when it comes to learning. You know, we're providing more options for our students to get a proper in-class education, in class. That's why most of the parents are gravitating toward the charter schools. They don't want their kids having to stay home and not having that face-to-face learning. So I support this amendment to broaden our students' horizons. This is an opportunity that I'm seeing in the future is going to transition from the old school setup to more charter schools. And think about this, colleagues. Those teachers that are teaching in these charter schools, they're not there because they're going to get more money. They're not there because they're protected by teachers' union. They're there because of the students. They're there ensuring that the students not only get a good education, the best education, but to make a difference in these students' lives. How many teachers have we come across in our lives that have made a difference, an impact in our lives? And I'm telling you, these teachers at these charter schools, they're there to make a difference for our students in every aspect of the word, making a difference. We need to support this. So I ask my colleagues, please support this amendment. And I plan on having another amendment to ensure that they do get this money. That's coming up in another chapter. So I thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak on this very important amendment, making a difference in our children's lives. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tello.
Point of information, Mr. Chair.
Point of information, ma'am.
Yeah, I just want to, I stand corrected. They may have sanitary permits, but those are all done just like public health has been doing for all other business establishment, renewing the sanitary permits without any inspections, very different than what we were mandating for DOE until the press release today where the superintendent says he's not going to do the inspections until April 2024. And the teachers, they're not mandated to follow Guam's law regarding certified teachers in the Department of Education. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak on this amendment? Senator Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question. Well, two things. Like, I supported the original Save the Charter Schools bill we put through here, but I've got some real concerns that I shared with the speaker concerning the over-enrollment of these caps. Sure, we could go down this road, but what's the point of caps if every time they violate the caps, legislature money bags is going to come out and pay for it? What's the point of the caps? if they're just going to violate it? What's the penalties when they violate it? Is there any penalties? So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, do I understand this correctly, that these schools are not required to get sanitary permits the same way as DOE schools? Did anybody answer that question?
No,
Mr. Chair, all the schools will be required to be inspected and get sanitary permits prior to the start of the next school year.
Does that include
That
charter
includes
schools?
all the schools, sir.
all schools.
All the schools. Okay. Because, yeah, I thought I heard a previous speaker say that they were not required to get sanitary permits. And if I heard that in error, then I apologize. So all the schools are going to be required to get sanitary permits next year, including the charter schools. Okay. All right.
Point of information, Mr. Chair, they're required, like all businesses, to get sanitary permits, but they're not required to be inspected, like DOE is required now to be inspected, why they're having such a hard time and why they need money to fix their schools.
Point of information, Mr. Chair, DOE is not required to be inspected because we moved the compliance timeline for the safety, sanitation, public health rules and regs to next school year. So there's a public law that says notwithstanding, the Guam Department of Education may operate without inspection or even after schools have failed inspection at the discretion of the superintendent and the director of public health, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I think that resolved all that. Yes.
Well,
sir.
yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker, for that clarification. Yeah, that's basically what I'm trying to figure out here. Do these charter schools have to do the same thing that GDOE schools do? Like, no, where the schools are being inspected, or are they doing it just like the businesses where they get the sanitary permit with no inspection? Has any of these, when's the last time a charter school was physically inspected?
That's something we won't be answering because we're not at a public hearing asking that question, Senator Park. I understand your concern, but that's something the oversight chair already said that he will make sure that they all follow the same law.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I will not make sure of anything. The law is that the school safety and sanitation guidelines go into effect at the start of the next school year for all the schools.
Okay.
Okay. Well, just so that it's clear, crystal clear, I think I would like to amend the amendment to read that Guam charter schools eligible for this funding shall acquire a sanitary permit by or before June 30th, 2024.
Do you have it in writing, if anything, so we can, or we're just going to state it and we'll see how we can word it in?
Yeah.
Can you restate it, please, so we can write along?
Sure. I'd like to add a subsection A. Guam charter schools eligible for this funding shall acquire a sanitary permit by or before June 30th, 2024.
Okay, let's take a quick recess while they write it, and then we'll recite it so we can finish it off. Okay?
Mr. Chair, for the sake of time, I'm just going to object right now to the amendment, so if we can just call for the vote.
But we still need time, just a few minutes. They're writing it now. Recess. Committee is called back to order from recess. Senator Parkinson, if you can please read your amendment.
Thank you,
To
sir.
the amendment.
Yes, my amendment to the amendment is to add a new Section A to the amendment. Guam charter schools eligible for funding under this section shall acquire a sanitary permit based on physical inspection by or before June 30th, 2024.
Thank you. Does anyone like to speak to this? Senator Tello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And had the opportunity to speak with the author of the amendment to clarify that this does not take in effect until June 30, 2024, at least until that time that they have to inspect. And I did just get off the phone with Vanjie from the charter schools. And all the charter schools have received their renewal of their sanitary permit, and which will expire on June 2024. So regardless, they will have to come back and get an additional inspection to move forward. Not an additional, they'll have to come back to get a renewal for next year. So, you know, I withdraw my objection because, like I said, I thought it was like today they had to get these inspections today, and that's not the case right now. You know, we passed 3 different bills regarding these inspections just recently, you know, and a notwithstanding is in there. But one thing's for sure is that in June 2024, these schools must comply. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there anyone else? Are there any objection to this amendment? If none, you don't need to close. There's no objection. Amendment passes. Now back to the amendment as amended. Does anyone want to speak to this? If not, I'll ask the author, Senator Barnett, to make a closing. If not, we'll just go ahead and go to vote. Okay. That being said, are there any objection? There being none, motion passes. That amendment is settled. Okay, on Senator Barnett's amendment. Okay, so we're good. Now, we will go to Senator Amanda Shelton. We're at your amendment now. And your amendment is in reference to, at a subsection, section 5 of page 113. Ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah. Okay, this amendment is to line 27 of page 113 to add a new subsection F to section 5 of chapter 11 miscellaneous appropriations of the bill to read, notwithstanding any other provision of law, I Magaʹhågan Guåhan is authorized to spend $746,900 from the audited excess fiscal year 2022 general fund revenues to pay an additional $100 per retiree who qualifies for the cost of living allowance payment pursuant to Section 5A of Chapter 11 of this Act, and to allow the Legislative Council and clerks to make technical corrections. Again, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to introduce an amendment, which, if approved, will deliver an additional $100 to our public sector retirees. The amendment funds the additional $100 COLA payment by appropriating the $746,900 from the audited excess FY2022 general fund revenues, the same funds we've been using for these several amendments that have passed most recently. And Mr. Chair, the amendment prioritizes an additional $100 COLA payment for each retiree, and if this amendment is approved, the total COLA payment for each retiree in FY 2024 will be $2,300. Mr. Chair, as I've shared in my efforts to increase COLA payments for our retirees, including through Bill 89-37, which we publicly heard in April of this year, while I'm thankful that a majority of our colleagues approved a $200 adjustment in last year's budget, the FY2023 budget, the $100 increase as proposed today through this amendment is just as important, especially at a time when costs continue to outpace individual and family incomes. And with the amendment before us, the governor is authorized to fund an additional $100 in COLA payments in FY 2024 through the audited excess 2022 general fund revenues. And recognizing that these COLA adjustments are made for federal government retirees and Social Security recipients, this amendment is a small but yet still meaningful step toward a broader effort to support over 7,000 retirees and their survivors in our community today. And Mr. Chair, we know that investing in our families and in our manamku is really the greatest return on investment that we can get here in our island, ensuring that no one, especially our seniors, especially our manamku, are not left behind in this budget bill. Sedus Masi.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. Maybe one day I'll retire. Senator Tello, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I too had a bill that I've been working on regarding COLA to providing what's called a cost of living adjustment, not a cost of living allowance, but an adjustment. And in the legislation, it would justify any kind of increase for our manamku, not just pulling a number out of a rabbit's hat or magician's hat to figure out what this cost would be. This is really not the place to start increasing any kind of adjustment without justification. You know, it was even brought up, the federal government does this adjustment, but it's also based on where you're living and other variables regarding this. So right now, you know, increasing COLA at this point, just for the sake of increasing it, does not make any sense. In fact, we could be denying our COLA recipients, our retirees, a true cost of living allowance. We have bills that are on the floor already that's had a public hearing. We should take this through session and discuss this on session floor, not in a budget bill. We owe that to our retirees. Maybe it's not 100 that they should get. Maybe it might be 200 based on the cost of living and inflation. Many of these recipients are on a fixed income while the prices of gas and food continue to go up. This is not a way to assist our retirees. Way to assist our retirees is to really go in and look at where we're living on Guam versus if somebody was living in Texas, it's a totally different cost of living there. But we all know the cost of living on Guam is quite high. And then again, there are two bills out there. One that would change it to a true cost of living to assist those retirees who live on a fixed income, who can't work anymore. That's the right thing to do. Not just, okay, we'll just give you 100 now and 100 later. Well, what happens the following year? So I'm going to have to, you know, the funding source, FY22, audited excess revenue, I don't complain about that. But what I do have a complaint about is not really justifying a true cost of living adjustment for our retirees. We're just throwing a number out there. And they deserve more than that. They have paved the way for us. So don't sell our retirees short. And asking my colleagues, so let's do this the right way and adjust the cost of living. Not allowance, but an adjustment every year, like the federal government does. Let's start there. Instead of pulling a number out of a hat. So I object to this amendment.
Thank you, Senator. Anyone else like to speak on this? Please be reminded, colleague, if you are a retiree, don't speak. It's in your best interest because you should recuse yourself. But anyway, anybody else like to speak? Nobody else? Are there any do you need to, yes, Madam Speaker, you want to speak? Madam Speaker, you wanted to speak on this?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I was trying to see the percentage increase. If they could signal me, how much? Or if we could tell us.
It's a 4.5% increase.
Okay. All right, I know, I was just curious because I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, if it's not this fiscal year, last fiscal year, that Social Security did an increase or 5% on their cost of living allowance. But I agree with the previous speaker that if there are bills that are pending, that those should also be heard. But I do agree, but this cost of living is always coming out of the budget every year, and I don't object to this $100 raise per retiree for this fiscal year. I know that there was a cost of living study done by Bureau of Statistics and Plans, and I tried to make their info match, but it doesn't exactly match, how they do that under the Social Security. So I'm trying to see what study to use to do that, but I agree. If there are bills that are pending, those should be heard. They should be put on the floor, and let's debate a system to do this as we go forward. But for this fiscal year, I have no objection, and I actually think it's a good idea that cost of living be increased for the retirees. We've heard a lot from them. I know all of us have about how hard it has been for them, especially those who've been retired for quite a while, to continue to survive the increasing costs of utilities, increasing costs of medical care. So I support this amendment.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? If not, Senator Amanda, would you like to close?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to introduce this amendment and to speak on it. I think if our colleagues who raise objection to this amendment are not satisfied with the amount, they think it is such a small amount, which I agree, I wish it could be more, then please let's amend this amendment to give more to the Manamco. And absolutely, our retirees and our Manamco, they deserve more than what we're giving them today, $100 in addition to the $2,200 we raised it to last year. But as one of our colleagues said a couple of days ago, let's not let the quest for perfection be the enemy of progress. So we have the opportunity today to do a little bit more for our Manamco, to give our retirees a little bit more. And we hear from them all the time when COLA is coming out, how much they appreciate this money, how hard they've worked for this money over the years, giving their devoted service to the government of Guam and the people of Guam. And this is really the least that we can do, a small token, not really of our appreciation, but something that they deserve, truly deserve as as our retirees who have given so much. So I ask my colleagues, our colleagues today, Mr. Chair, for their support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My colleague, there is an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion passes. We are now on the next amendment proffered by Senator Parkinson. Is it add a new section or correction? Senator Snickers, before we get to you, Senator Parkinson, we'll go to Senator Snickers. Senator, one. My colleagues, I know of the time, but please understand, the clock is on us now. The clock was good last week. Now we need to catch up on some of the stuff. We have 36 amendments in the next chapter. We need to wrap this up like fast. So, I mean, I want to make sure we're clear. Everything is heard. Senator Snickers, your amendment? Please read it out. Did you find it? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you, I found it. Okay, this is on page 114, to add a new section to Chapter 11 of this bill to read section appropriation for Sanctuary Incorporated of Guam for fiscal year 2024. The sum of $250,000 is appropriated from the audited fiscal year 2022 Annual General Fund excess revenues of the Department of Administration for Sanctuary Incorporated of Guam for continuing programs and services in the co-ed shelter, strengthening family programs, parenting support and parenting skills group, adult anger management and youth anger management, and tobacco cessation. I ask my colleagues for their support.
Thank you, Senator Snickers. Anyone would like to speak to this? Senator Blas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I can appreciate and I can understand the need for the amendment. I'm just a little concerned, and maybe I can ask OFB. We've been appropriating a lot of this fund. How much have we appropriated versus already?
Give it a couple seconds. They're doing the math.
Yes, Senator, I'm going to reiterate your question. You're asking how much of FY22 excess, no, how much of FY22 lapses have we appropriated thus far? The answer is 9.7 million.
How much did we anticipate that we were going to get from this excess fund source?
Senator, this is the total amendments that have been passed thus far.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we would have to wait until the audit is actually out to find out exactly whether or not there's sufficient funds to cover this 9.7 we've appropriated.
Okay, but was there any discussion, or do we have any discussion as to what we can anticipate that was going to be coming out of this? What was the tracking?
The latest information, Senator, that I received was that the audit, they're going to try to get the audit out by the end of next month.
Which was due on June 30th.
By law, sir, yes.
By law, it was due by June 30th.
That's correct.
And so, I'm not objecting to this, to this amendment, Mr. Chair. What I'm bringing about is just for our, for us to understand. We've already appropriated about $9.7 million for a fund that we are waiting for an audit report on that was due by law since June 30th. How disingenuous is it to be able to not to be able? Who's supposed to do this audit?
I'm sorry, sir, before I answer that question, I want to go back and kind of just make one correction because of the recent bill. The amendment was passed with the COLA, so it's 10 million now.
It's what?
It's 10 million instead of the 9.7 I quoted. Because of the recently passed amendment for the COLA, it's up to 10 million now.
It's up to 10 million now.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, not to take away from any of that. I'm just concerned that we're appropriating this money, and we're appropriating it on the basis of a report that was, again, due since June 30th. I mean, would have appreciated if we had that June 30th report. Who was supposed to submit that report to us?
Are you referring to the audit report?
Yeah. Yes.
I believe the OPA is supposed to.
And the OPA was supposed, but the OPA hasn't been able because of the paperwork hasn't been gone. DOA hasn't turned in the paperwork.
There were a couple of issues that were brought to mind, Senator, but my understanding those issues have already been addressed. Why, again, it's continued to be delayed, I have no idea.
Okay.
Why.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I just bring this as a matter of discussion on this bill. Again, like I said, I've got nothing against this bill. I understand, that it's necessary. I caution that we're proposing measures for a fund that we have not received any information on yet, as of yet, and it's scary because then which ones will get priority or which ones will get funded, or if any funding is available for any of this. Okay? So I bring that just as basically as something to consider by the body. Not to say that, again, like I said, we hope that there's the money that's there, but we also have got to be able to be very, very careful that it may not be there. And so, I just bring that up as a point of information, quite honestly. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this? Senator Dueñas?
Sidus Moasi, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly understand the intent, but I wanted to see if the author would yield. As I go through the Department of Youth Affairs budget, from what I understand, there is an appropriation under the federal matching on youth programs, and these were outsourced programs that I'm familiar with that are usually done. Was there a request for additional funding from Sanctuary that prompted this amendment?
Senator Snickers, do you yield to the question?
Yes, sir, gladly. So earlier this year, Sanctuary has contacted the office, and they said that they, wanted support to continue the $250,000 allotted to them as in previous years. So that's where this is coming from. Also, they discussed with me how DYA actually, and Sanctuary cooperates in the use of the funds. So upon their request, I proffered this amendment.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, and I'll go to Steve for this. Hopefully it will be in the system, but that's why I go back to youth programs appropriation under Department of Youth Affairs. The sum of $200,000 is appropriated from the general fund to DYA for fiscal year 2024 to fund the programs contracted out to non-governmental organizations doesn't say this, but such a sanctuary, because I used to do this pass-through, but it was under contract and had to meet all the requirements of procurement for services to youth or runaways, homeless, victims of abuse, fiscal year 2024. So is that are they currently operating a contract with Sanctuary Incorporated, and are there any other nonprofits that they're working with in terms of what their budget digest might show?
My understanding, Senator, it's in conjunction with DYA, and DYA basically is just a pass-through of the funds to Sanctuary.
Okay, so that's what it's currently showing on the on their current appropriations. Or do they have a category where they're funding Sanctuary for runaway and homeless youth?
The 200,000, yes, Senator. But then again, just remember we appropriated to DYA, and they're supposed to basically transfer that money to Sanctuary.
Yeah.
The specific mechanism, I'm not too sure how but if it's treated the same like any nonprofit organization, then yes, it's through the Department of Administration.
Is there anything else showing in the system in terms of any other outsourced program for runaway and homeless youth?
Being funded from this 200,000?
Yeah.
I need to give me a moment. I need to check that.
Okay. I mean, I just point this out for the record because I know that this has traditionally been an item in the budget for Department of Youth Affairs, and I mean, if we're doubling it, we're doubling it by this proposed amendment. But I just wanted to make sure that it didn't go away because I know this was an annual program that is supported as these agencies do collaborate. And so I'll just continue to listen to the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Tello, you want to speak to the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve, did you say that you had already incorporated in this budget bill under DYA to provide Sanctuary some funding?
No, Senator. Sanctuary, DYA did not request any appropriation for Sanctuary in FY2024 budget.
They didn't request for any
No.
appropriation at all?
That's correct.
Okay, in FY23, did we provide any money for Sanctuary in FY23?
Yes, we did.
And how much was that?
250,000 out of the general fund.
Okay, and you don't understand why, did you ask DYA, why didn't they ask for that same appropriation they did in FY23?
Senator, in cases like this, when we meet with the departments and stuff like that, we ask them, first of all, they have a budget submission, they submit it, and then we take that budget submission and ask them, how is this in compared to the governor's executive budget as supposed to be reflective of their needs? They just didn't ask for it. So if they didn't ask it, we didn't ask for it either.
Do you happen to know, I mean, who's the oversight chair of, DYA? Okay, well...
Senator Shelton is the oversight.
Of DYA.
That's correct. But if you notice what Senator Singer said was Sanctuary communicated with him and asked him.
Directly. Well, I'm pretty sure a lot of, nonprofits are going to be, calling us up and asking for additional funding, but if you can't, here's DYA who oversees certain programs, and especially nonprofit organizations. If there was a reason why they did not provide any funding to Sanctuary, there must be a reason, and I would really like to know what that is. Maybe they didn't spend all the $250,000 that they received in FY23 and didn't see a need, because one of the issues that I'm coming to find out is that these nonprofit organizations are not providing the reports. They're spending reports that are required by law. So, here we are deciding to, give everybody who calls us up, some funding without even knowing if the agency in which has been supporting that nonprofit organization didn't do this for a reason. There's got to be a reason for it. I mean, sanctuary is important. I've supported sanctuary in the past, but without knowing why DYA didn't request any funding for them, I think that's something that we all need to hold, and make a phone call. But if no one's going to do that, take the time to do it, and we're all starting to pass out money like it's nothing, like the air you breathe in, just every time you breathe, you give 100,000 here, 100,000 there. It's not going to happen because there might not be enough funding. Go ahead, if you have something to say, Mr.
No,
Chair.
just to be very specific, OAB advised me, the appropriation was for DOA, not through DYA. That's why DYA did not ask.
Did DOA ask then?
No.
So through sanctuary, DOA is usually the normal person that provides. So in FY23, was it DYA or DOA that provided the 250 pass-through to the nonprofit?
Yes, Senator. In most cases with the nonprofit, most of the appropriations are made to DOA as a pass-through to these nonprofit organizations. In FY23, the appropriation for sanctuary was made to DOA. Maybe that's the reason why DYA didn't request for it in their budget.
Okay, that explains it. So and I'm asking you, did DOA request for this funding for sanctuary?
Not in FY24, but in FY23, the appropriation was made to DOA.
Okay. Well, that being said, I don't feel that, even though sanctuary is important, and if we do have some real money, tangible money, because right now we're at 10,413,635 right now. So I'm going to object to this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Point of information, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
The reason for my line of questioning is if you go to page 74 on Department of Youth Affairs, that's what I read. Under that, starting at line 11, there's $200,000 for runaway and homeless youth. This was the exact language when I was the Director of Youth Affairs that was used to fund sanctuary. And that's why I'm asking. And then the only difference was it wasn't an automatic pass-through. What happens is once this budget is approved, then Department of Youth Affairs puts out a solicitation. And normally there really aren't any other organizations that provide care and custody for runaway and homeless youth besides sanctuary. So it's almost a given every year that this money gets passed through Department of Youth Affairs under a line item, budget item like this, to sanctuary. And that's why I asked if there's anything in the system right now of any other procurement, and I'm getting a no to that, of any other runaway and homeless youth organization. So my point was that it appears to be in this budget, and I just wanted to point that out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak to this amendment? There being none, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a floor amendment that I submitted to the drive that I'd like to proffer. It's to change the word Department of Administration to the Department of Youth Affairs, and to add after for the Sanctuary Incorporated of Guam or other contract services for, and then these programs and services that are listed.
So you have an amendment to this amendment?
Yeah, so
Okay.
it was submitted, it's in the drive, the clerks have it, I think they didn't pass it out because when the
Okay.
amendment was changed,
So we just give it a minute or two, I think they're gonna collect it, or you wanna go ahead and speak on it?
Yes.
Only because I'm just curious.
Well, they
if
didn't
anybody
pass
has
it out, and so I'm just hoping it just passes without getting passed out. Otherwise, they have the copies. It's to change the word from Department of Administration to Department of Youth Affairs, and then after the word Sanctuary Incorporated, for Sanctuary Incorporated Guam, adding or other contract services. Isn't it printed?
I'm just trying to look at it because, and that's why I was gonna ask for.
This
at
has
least-
been submitted for a long time. I'm not
Oh, it was
sure why
early?
it's not passed out, yeah.
Okay, well, just give it a couple minutes, let everybody try to find it on their pile. And
No, they haven't passed it out, right?
Oh.
think the clerk's issue is the 22 versus 23. When I made my amendment, this said 23, so just ignore that part. That's not the part I'm changing. I'm changing the youth affairs, it's the strikeout and the underlines.
So you're saying after Department of Administration to reflect, strike out Department of Administration to say Department of Youth Affairs.
Correct, that's one.
And that's the key thing there, right?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, that's the only thing, really.
No, and after the word for the Sanctuary Incorporated of Guam, it's or other contract services for, and then these programs.
Okay. My colleagues, do you see that on your drive? I think everybody sees it. Are there any objection to this amendment? Oh, you want to speak on it? Okay.
Yeah, so very briefly, I would like it to go through DYA because my understanding is, for me, I want to procure the services of Sanctuary if they work for DYA. And so I want DYA to be able to decide what it needs and what it can get with this type of money. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Tello, you wanted to speak to the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question to the author of the amendment. And I don't have a copy of it in front of me. If it's being passed out, that's fine. But in the meantime, Mr. Chair, like I said, I have a question to the author. On page 74 of the bill, under Department of Youth Affairs, where it shows here that $200,000 is appropriated from the general fund to DYA to fund programs contracted to non-governmental organizations for services to youth who are runaways, homeless, and victims of abuse for fiscal year 2024. The intent is to support the amendment that's going to be amended to add another $250,000 to do the same thing that's already in the budget bill that provides them $200,000. So that's the questions to the author of the amendment.
All right. Madam Speaker, do you yield to the question? And if you can please repeat the question one more time.
I understand the question, and I will yield. My issue is that I don't know the intent of the underlying amendment, whether it's to double the amount of money that DYA will have. But I just think if we're going to give money to Sanctuary, that it should go through DYA. So that's the intent of my amendment. Now, the underlying amendment, whether it's to double or not, I actually was not aware that that was already in the budget. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there's no doubling because it's very specific. It goes Sanctuary.
Yeah, and actually, Mr. Chair, the author did not realize there was already $200,000 from DYA going into the projects for runaway and homeless and victims. It is already in the budget bill on page 74 under Department of Youth Affairs. Now, this amendment is just taking it from Department of Administration, which actually it's never been under Department of Administration. Really, it's been under DYA this whole time. So it's just very, well, I'm just going to object to the amendment.
All right.
I know it's...
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Yeah, another information? Yes, please.
Yeah, just to be clear, and this is why I wanted to go through this. So essentially, if there's nothing else in the system, it's clear because, and the reason why Sanctuary Incorporated almost always wins that award for the $200,000 that's been placed in the budget for Department of Youth Affairs is because, Mr. Chairman, there's really no other care and custody organization for runaway and homeless youth on Guam. This is typically court-ordered, and these individuals are really this kind of the similar individuals at Department of Youth Affairs who are classified as status offenders. These are offenders who basically, they're not offenders in particular, they haven't broken any laws, but they're typically known as beyond control, runaways, and the like, and so it's not appropriate a lot of times to bring these clientele to Department of Youth Affairs because Department of Youth Affairs does have other contractual agreements for housing under their own system with their youth service workers to handle status offenders. But a lot of times with these young people, if they're found to have, by the courts found to have extenuating circumstances where they're not particularly completely beyond control, but the circumstances for which they're running away is typically because an unsuitable house and house living. And so essentially, I've never seen in my entire, and I was there for 8.5 years, I've never seen another organization receive an award when this appropriation is made, because it's very specialized under juvenile justice, that you have to be a specialized organization to manage runaway and homeless youth, particularly when it's court ordered. So if that's the intent to double it, well, we'll have to understand the will of the body, but that is clear that's what's almost guaranteed to happen, because there's really no other organization that is licensed to handle court order. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Understood. I understand where you're coming from, the possible double, but there's nothing mandating DYA to give them the money or even do that, versus this one is very specific through growth, through DYA to go to sanctuary. There's a difference. I know where you come from. I understand that. Anyone else like to speak on this? If not, you have an objection, correct? Okay. Folks, we're talking about the amendment, to the amendment authored by the Speaker. Are there any objection? None. Okay. Yeah, correction, I'm sorry. Your objection. Too many objections. Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand in support to the amendment. Amanda? Motion passes. Now we're going to the amendment as amended. Okay, are we on track, folks?
Okay, I think I still had the floor, Mr.
Yes.
Chair. Yeah. I wanted to just talk about the funding source a little bit. So in the July 31 CRER, they accounted for all the appropriations that we have made from the audited FY22 general fund surplus balance. And those come up to about $21 million, I guess. And then they had a list of the appropriations from the unappropriated general fund balance of FY22. I think that means the unaudited balance from FY22. And interestingly, of course, none of the audited appropriations, general fund balance appropriations, were expended or encumbered. But almost all of the unaudited appropriations that we made were used, except for the one to the GACSC. Is that the charter schools? Yeah, so that charter schools, the increase of $500 for per pupil cost, that's the only one that's not funded. So that increase from $7,000 to $7,500 actually did not occur. It was never funded. They didn't get the money. So they're showing that money as still available. And I just thought it was interesting how, yeah, so we paid with FY22, what's not been funded is the cannabis and agriculture programs, the slaughterhouse, the long-term specialty doctors for GMH, the deposit to the hospital capital improvement fund. All of those are coming out of FY22 audited expenses as well. But it looks like even with that, if we follow their CRER, they've also accounted for all of those and predicted a $99 million. That's what they're predicting now. We don't know, of course, what it's actually going to be, but they're predicting 99. Then you said we've spent from like this chapter, 10 million of that, right? All right. And yeah, I am just, I guess, I agree with some of my colleagues who are saying, we're saying these are additional appropriations from the FY22 audited excess that's going to be proven or not proven in a few weeks. It should have been proven by now so that we can very clearly determine what to do with that money. we're a little guessing here, but still, I think it's worthwhile to guess as opposed to leaving it unused or leaving it for someone else to use without us even knowing where they're using it. But I just wondered too, if we're, all of these, if you look at so many of these appropriations that we make, I mean, it really is up to the discretion of the administration if they're going to put the cash in there or not. For example, even the cash to DOE, the cash to GMH, all these places where they're finding, I mean, they have serious issues. CPS, public health, and I am concerned that if they don't put the cash to those places, then the problems are perpetuated. But I do believe that we are trying our best to find avenues, put them concretely into the law so that the money can go to those agencies that are suffering, such as GMH, DOE, public health. So, I think I'm just looking for every way that we can use our legislative appropriations power to dictate the priorities of the government, as is our job. So I agree with the amendment to use part of that, $250,000 for home for youth. I know the juvenile justice system and that this is very necessary. I just think if DYA does not need it for that purpose and they've already got enough, that hopefully they will save it and use it for other purposes. I intend to ask again, and I've been asking, that CPS be declared an emergency again, because I do believe we need more social workers, and I would like to see the DYA workers help them, or in whatever way the government, the administration can manage that I just think we need to really get another handle again on the needs for social workers and the needs to, balance our government, like where CPS is in a crisis right now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to the amendment as amended? None? Is there an objection? There's an objection. I don't think you need to close. There's one objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. Favor of the amendment? Motion passes. Okay, we're now going to the last amendment. One more amendment, okay? One more amendment.
Sir, I rise to make a motion to recess until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Objection.
Okay, folks, one more amendment in this chapter. Let's finish this one, and at least I'll open the next chapter.
Are we
then
paying
tomorrow
overtime?
morning we'll move. Then we'll recess immediately after that.
Are we paying overtime?
No, that failed. So let's move on. Then there's an objection to the motion to recess. All in favor to recess until tomorrow, please raise your hand to recess. Motion fails. We'll go to the next amendment. Senator Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to make this quick. I want to add a new section to Chapter 11 of the bill to read GFD and DOC additional cycle funding, notwithstanding any other provision of law. The amount of $1.8 million shall be appropriated to the Guam Fire Department from the excess general fund revenues of fiscal year 2022 to fund one cycle of firefighter recruits. The amount of $1.8 million shall be appropriated to the Department of Corrections from the excess general funds revenues of fiscal year 2022 to fund one cycle of corrections officer recruits, to allow legal to make any and technical corrections. So we are facing kind of an interesting challenge today, one that is kind of a slow-moving emergency. Recently at an oversight hearing with the Guam Fire Department, I spoke with them and they said that, I asked them how many, because they were saying that they had a shortage of firefighters. They said they only had 200 of the 300 firefighters needed to fulfill their mandate. And so I asked them a follow-up question. I asked them how many firefighters were 45 and older. Basically, I was trying to find out how many firefighters would be retiring in the next 10 years when they reach the retirement age of 55. And in just 10 short years, we stand to lose half of our fire department's invaluable experience, their collective wisdom, and their irreplaceable skills. See, the Guam Fire Department has been one of those departments that has done more with less. They have been able to fulfill their mandate that requires 300 firefighters with only 200 firefighters. But in every corner of governance, this principle holds true. Addressing potential problems today can prevent them from festering into larger, harder to manage crisis tomorrow. We have some of the best trained firefighters ever. These guys have done more with less, and they are trained out the wazoo. But a lot of them are retiring, and they have no one to replace them and no one to give that valuable knowledge and institutional experience to. We have the power to nip this problem in the bud. Right now, the Guam Fire Department, they're doing all right. But we owe it to them and we owe it to the island to make sure that we address problems before the problems get there. Government at its best is not reactive, it's proactive. It anticipates, it prepares, and it acts. It sees the potential problems and ensures that they don't take root and grow into generational issues. Too often we focus on the short term that we don't invest in the long term. This is an opportunity for this body to correct that and invest in the long-term health of our public safety services. So I call upon my colleagues and all who believe in secure, prosperous future to support the funding of an additional cycle of firefighters and DOC guards. Let's ensure that the torch of knowledge, experience, and commitment is passed on. Let's act now. Let's act decisively, forging a path of preparedness, resiliency, and unity, because we do not need these critical public safety departments to fall to shambles before we begin addressing them. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. And anyone like to speak to this? No, no one on this side? No one on this side? Are there any objections since there's no one wants to speak, so we don't have to further any discussion? Senator Barnett, please, because I know you're the oversight for DOC.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wish I could paint as rosy a picture about the Department of Corrections as the previous speaker did for the Guam Fire Department, but they're in trouble. I don't want to mention here on the record the inmate to corrections officer ratio, but it's at a very dangerous level, and I fully support this amendment. And I also commend the author of the amendment for being so generous with his funding source and allowing for an additional, allowing me to share in this funding and fund that additional cycle for the Department of Corrections. I don't think anyone in this body would argue that they don't need an additional cycle. And so again, I ask for the support of my colleagues on this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone like to speak? If none, are there any objections to this amendment? There being none,
Kobe.
Motion passes. Senator Blas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
But before you speak, I just want to make it known. Chapter 11 on miscellaneous appropriation is now closed. So we understand this, it's closed. Okay? Now, before I recess until tomorrow morning, Senator Blas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, notwithstanding the House rules, I move that we temporarily rise out of the committee hall for the purposes of going into motions to be able to hopefully place a bill on the session agenda and then go back down after.
Objection.
There's a motion to go back to temporary recess.
Rise out of the committee.
Or temporarily rise from the committee of the whole to go back to motion to hopefully get a bill on the agenda. There is an objection. All in favor to temporarily rise? Please raise your hand, ma'am. Please raise your hand to temporarily rise. Okay, we will temporarily rise. At this point, we will now temporarily recess.
We're back from recess and we're temporarily back on the second reading. Senator Blas, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to recess until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.
There's a motion to recess until tomorrow at 9. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're recessed until 9 a.m.